From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Andrew the Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Now, guys, we always include just for ourselves a little inspirational or tangential quote at the top of our notes. And usually this is, a thing just for us. But I suggest we read this quotation aloud because it is astonishing for this conversation.
Pretty short. Should we go one word at a time, round robin? No, I'm just kidding. I think you should read it, Ben. You found this one.
No, you're back from you're back from your travels.
I insist.
You should do it.
No, I insist.
Can you do it in German?
No.
Almost. Anyway, this quote is the following. My measure of success is that the International Olympic Committee bans everything we do.
Cool.
Understood. That is not from Dan Harmon, although that was a cool conversation. That is instead from a guy named Michael Goldblatt, the former head of DARPA's Defense Sciences Office.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Of course they do.
What's this have to do with? I don't understand what DARPA's activities has to do with the Olympic Committee.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. And shout out to our buddies who was that guy who just proposed a no holds barred Olympics a while back. Remember?
You mean the steroid Olympics? The juice Olympics?
Yeah. It was like, do whatever you want. Just sign a waiver. Yeah, that feels like a billionaire move. It's no secret, right, that humanity is known for pushing the proverbial envelope. And we were thinking about this earlier. Right now, human and technically non-human research is inventing technology that human civilization does not understand. Have we all seen the studies where a bunch of boffins come out with something that they are not fully cognizant of, like the AI figured it out?
Yeah, well, but I also saw some former tech magnate. It was either Google or Twitter. I want to say it was a former Google person, basically saying that technology, AI is getting so advanced that it's going to eventually start inventing things and creating things that we fully cannot understand.
Yes.
And that is when it becomes majorly slippery, slopey, and scary.
Absolutely. And then we'll get to a point where perhaps AGI starts inventing things that just help itself, right? Quite a logical move. Humans increasingly not part of the conversation, but this is weird. We're on the precipice of great discovery as a society, and civilization is at the same time leveraging new innovations, inventions, and discoveries to experiment on individual humans. And I think we've all heard this, it always gets sold to the public in terms of social and scientific benefit, right? We're doing this. We're doing gain of function research to eradicate disease, not to build new diseases, right?
Well, I mean, we certainly know even under the Third Reich, for example, they would have liked to think of their troops as super soldiers, and that was largely fueled by amphetamines, which was a technology of a kind.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And then we'd say, we're pursuing so-called AI or quantum computing to create more efficient computational power. We're doing this other research to make sure that air and water and food stay clean. But to your point, Noel, there's a dirty secret. Right? There's a badger in the bag and it needs a bath. A lot of this research is coming from military funding and for military purposes. However, it's sold to the public, that's often just a knock-on side effect. That's a nice thing to have.
It's often the case, right? We always seem to find out about this kind of tech way later, or once it has sort of either outlived its usefulness or become perhaps dated in the military circles. Only then do we start to see it sold to the public, or the public even becomes aware of it.
Yeah, and we are talking about super soldiers. We have some stuff to explore about super soldiers this evening. Of course, the concept became popularized again in the West with the reign and fall of Marvel movies. Right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to come back. I
Well,
think Doomsday is going to be good.
people say that Thunderbolts one's pretty good.
Yeah. I liked it. I liked it.
Yeah, they said it's sort of got that Guardians of the Galaxy vibe, which was the last franchise from that world that I found charming. But yeah, I'm happy to hear it. You know what it makes me think of though, Ben, is the movie, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie,
Universal Soldier.
Universal Soldier. I mean, there certainly was a golden age in the '90s where super soldier kind of stuff was very much floating around the zeitgeist, and that is the one. There's also a Demolition Man, another one with the seashells, but that was sort of a super soldier kind of sitch, right?
Starship Troopers and like the Halo movie that was created, this concept of an entire exoskeleton suit that makes each individual soldier basically an army of their own.
Arguably Iron Man. Biggest plot hole in Marvel Universe was that this guy can build suits whenever he wants, and he doesn't bother to give Hawkeye a suit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Kind of a dick move.
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, Hawkeye's got his he's got skills. He doesn't need a suit. What is his power? Perfect aim? Something along those lines?
It's not a power. He's just really good at aiming. Yeah.
You guys remember there was a bit in the Fallout games. I want to say it was in maybe Fallout 3, or was the one before New Vegas, which I forget what number it was. But there were these. That's right. There were these basically like super soldiers that died in their super suits.
Yes.
And when you encounter them in the world, they're skeletons that are continuing to walk around in their super suits. I thought that was very clever. Very dystopian and clever. Yeah.
Yes, and as we'll see, not just clever and dystopian, but arguably prescient. Yeah, will super soldiers become a reality? The things we see in fiction. If so, what will these future fighters look like, and what does that mean for the world ahead? This is our cold open.
Icy.
Icy cold. Icy hot. Here are the facts. We've talked about this before. We have to be broken records here, but not broken arrows. All war creates an arms race. War and conflict are huge drivers of innovation.
It's true. Another Fallout line, war never changes. I think I've always dropped that one, but it's true because the fundamentals of war, us versus them, and the nature of it needing to be an ongoing thing in order to fuel this military industrial complex and keep the money flowing, definitely never changes.
Yeah. We're talking physics, medicine, chemistry. You scroll through the book of human endeavors, and the odds are that whatever discipline you land your finger on, you will find that some of the greatest breakthroughs in that field came about as a direct result of war and the horrors involved. You know, like a lot of stuff would have languished in peacetime labs, but all of a sudden your favorite military or your favorite government pulls out all the stops. They throw money at the problem. They push these things into service, even when they are unproven, so long as it gives a potential battlefield edge. Radar is a good example. Bayonets are an example. Horses, but of course, you know, nukes.
For sure. I guess I've got the Cold War on my mind because I was just in Berlin and I went to the Checkpoint Charlie Museum and they had a lot of weaponry on display there. I just found out for the first time that the Berlin Wall actually had like automatic, like unmanned weapons that would shoot people trying to escape, shoot to kill. And not to mention, I believe these things that were called cluster bombs that were very good at wiping out huge crowds, but also would leave behind unexploded ordnance that would cause problems for years and years to come. So it's a great example, Ben, of technology that solves a problem, but maybe isn't thought through in its entirety in terms of the knock-on effects.
Yeah, 100%. Because especially in the sensitive time windows of war deployment, right? You don't have the privilege of saying, let's wait till this thing is 100% and definitely good. You have to do your best to stem the tide, right, of whatever the invading horde may be. And we also see with this, in step to that point, we see a long, long history of nations that push to provide their soldiers with individual advances, weapons or new material for weapons, better and better armor, horses, of course, shout out to the Khanates, other modes of transport, and drugs. I recently re-listened to our episode on the Viking berserkers. Do you guys remember that? Yes. Mm-hmm. That was the one where the idea was that this somewhat elite fighting force got dosed up on psychoactive substances.
Right. And such were nude for whatever reason, just to freak people out. Like, what a flex. Yeah.
Right. They're beyond pain, right? They're like the Urukai. And this idea then of a super soldier, we could argue, is surprisingly ancient. We could even say we see it throughout literature in the form of demigods, right? Hercules is a super soldier, not even fully human. And then, of course, superheroes, Captain America, Agent Walker, Bucky, the Flag Smashers, Isaiah. Now I'm just getting...
You lost me at Captain America.
Isaiah Bradley.
Yeah. I think Achilles is a really good version of that because it is kind of the pursuit of everyone out there attempting to create exoskeletons for, quote, super soldiers, to create different technologies that would be worn by a soldier that makes them better than human, is to remove those tiny little places where a soldier is most vulnerable.
Yeah. The parable of Achilles' heel. Yeah. I think I agree with that, and we see real world examples too throughout history where better or superior training and equipment can wildly tip the scales between otherwise evenly matched fighting forces. Obviously, we've got a lot of veterans in the audience tonight, and thank you for tuning in. This trend never stopped. We could argue that the search for increasingly powerful super soldiers only accelerates in the modern day, and that's where we give our big shout out to DARPA, one of our first audio episodes, one of the early ones.
Yeah, that's right. 1958, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, was founded as the central research and development organization for the DoD. Starting in the late 80s and early 90s, they started really focusing a lot of their energies on exactly what we're talking about today. The idea of giving that edge to good old Uncle Sam, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in the late 1980s and early 1990s, they started, like you're saying, Noel, focusing on better, in their mind, better preparing soldiers, sailors, folks in the Air Force for conflict, even if that meant, in theory, upending established precedents for war, right? Or sometimes even theoretically transforming these individuals themselves. This is where we get to stuff like the much lauded Future Soldier 2030 project.
Have you guys heard that soundbite from Trump where he's kind of bragging about like, oh, you have no idea what weapons we have. We've got weapons that you wouldn't believe, that you don't know anything about. Seems a little bit of tip of the hand there, but I thought that was very interesting and telling.
Oh, yeah. It's agreeable, right? Like the public and the private thing, that's a conflict we'll get to.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you guys remember seeing some of the video, I was going to call it propaganda, the video presentations of the advancements for the Future Soldier 2030 project that were things like headsets and heads-up displays and other technologies displayed.
Yeah, this was stuff for like controlling unmanned, quote-unquote, weapons like drones and things like that. And this stuff that was sort of trotted out or that's sort of being, discussed here is more advanced, kind of almost like VR-ification, right? Video gamification of these kinds of weapons.
Well, yeah, it's part of like the Talos project and stuff like that where the new one is the HEO project, but the Talos project that's trying to build a full-on exoskeleton. Like that every soldier that goes out would wear this lightweight thing, this tactical assault light operator suit.
That has cybernetic interface, possibly aided by smart drugs, which we'll get into, the ability to translate languages in real time. And I think that point about gamification is really solid. it is eerily like what you may see in some of your favorite video games. Now, the specific initiative, Future Soldier 2030, it did get largely shelved by 2015, late 2015, but I would argue it instead sort of decentralized to other more discrete projects pursuing, a narrow scope of the larger ambition. And of course,
it turned right into the Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit project, and it got turned into the Hyper Enabled Operator project, which is this whole new thing that is exactly what you're talking about, Ben. How do we make sure we are the dominant side that makes informed decisions faster? And that's ultimately what SOCOM, what Special Operations Command was looking for, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, this is also not to say that the U.S. is the only crew in the game here. Past or present, we already mentioned it, Nazi and Allied forces alike in World War II administered drugs to create what we could call temporary super soldiers. Germans, to your point, Noel, proudly dosed their forces with Pervitin, which is a terrible name, and also an amphetamine with terrible effects over long term. We got to talk about the one that may not be familiar with a lot of people in the West, Russia and their heat pills.
Yeah, this one was new to me.
Yeah, tell us about it, man. Tell us about it.
Heat pills, I believe a substance called 2,4-dinitrophenol. Got that, which is actually used as an herbicide, a weight loss drug, and also an explosive. But if you take it, it apparently keeps you from getting too chilly in the brutal cold of the Russian tundra.
Yeah, or at least feeling too cold. Right until the effects wear off. And nowadays, the biggest other name in the superhero or super soldier game, I should say, is China, and we'll see why in just a bit. I think maybe we end this here are the facts aspect by acknowledging something we alluded to earlier. The tricky thing with a lot of this research is that a significant amount of it remains classified until after it's been perfected or deployed in combat, because giving away the secrets also gives away the edge. That's their perspective on any side of a conflict. So with the fact that we are working with publicly available information, what we found paints a fascinating and frightening picture. What will the next generations of super soldiers look like after a certain point? Will they still be considered humans?
Or more human than human?
More human than human. Where's that from?
That is White Zombie, but I believe
is.
I believe it is the catchphrase of the company in Blade Runner. That it refers to the replicants being more human than human as a selling point, not as something weird and creepy at all.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And we may not even need to get into cloning because there's a lot to cover here. Here's where it gets crazy. Gentlemen, I suggest that we begin by grouping these potentialities into three rough categories: technological augmentation, biochemical augmentation, and true story, genetic modification. So we talked about exoskeletons. Maybe we start there. I feel like that's the most plausible thing to see deployed in the near future.
Yeah, these you can see recent news, even as of February of this year, where there are photos being taken by the U.S. military specifically and the Chinese military, as well as I believe it is in Taiwan, the military there. They're all putting out these photographs for news stories of their soldiers in a version of an exosuit. Different types of exosuits. Almost all of them, though, right now at least, that are being shown in all of these different countries are exosuits that they're used for moving heavy equipment, for loading howitzer shells, giant heavy shells into other war machines.
Like in Alien, right? Sort of like that loader thing in the Alien films.
We're not
similar,
like
but
that.
less of a footprint on it.
We're not. It's nothing like the big metal things or anything like
that.
that.
It's not a mech.
These are pieces of different materials that are like strapped to knees and to backs and to arms to help lift. So it's literally to take the load off of general logistics lifting and carrying.
I thought you were going to say take a load off Annie. Shout out to the band.
Take a load for free. I mean, it's sort of like a plussed up version of the kind of back braces that you'll see like UPS people wearing.
It's empowered. Yeah. It's imagine a suit of armor that literally gives you super strength.
Yep.
In addition, it can process your waste fluids. So no more having to stop and pop a squat. It can supply nutrition and water for a limited time, and it can do a lot more stuff. We owe, the initial United States experiments in this owe a lot to a 4-star general named Paul F. Gorman. He retired in 1985, if generals could ever be said to retire, and he wrote this paper that was incredibly prescient. He pitched the idea of what he called a super troop exoskeleton, and he said this will protect you against the reason he was inspired to look into this is because he found that battlefield fatigue was a leading cause of injury and death for soldiers. Think about it. You're carrying all this heavy stuff. You don't know what's going on. It's already heavy if you're on a regular walk, and now you're in conflict, and you can't lose any of that gear ideally, but the wrong biochemical weapon, a 50 caliber bullet, it can end you very quickly, especially if you're tired and not alert. So his pitch was something that protects against all of this, along with audio visual sensors, touch sensitive sensors, haptic sensors, thermal imaging, classic predator, sound suppression, internal climate control. Really cool stuff. And incredibly, I think, again, incredibly forward-looking to describe all of this in the 1980s.
Yeah, but none of that has been achieved yet. It sounds awesome, but he's describing the Iron Man suit, right? I mean, basically, it's like an ultimate exoskeleton.
But no flight. I don't think he ever proposed flight for these. That might be a bridge too far for him. I love the point too about the research that was in the civilian world, to your point, Matt, about helping people with mobility issues, right? Helping people who cannot walk gain more agency in their lives, or helping with conditions like multiple sclerosis. That's where we see a lot of the research really germinating.
Yeah, there certainly are like technological advancements in artificial limbs, for example, right? Like that do use a lot of this haptic stuff in order to be a proper extension of an individual.
Yeah, but what we are seeing is a lot of these companies that start out getting a grant to work on the Talos project, which ran from 2013 to 2019. The companies start trying to make prototypes for soldiers, but then they realize, it actually works better for Amazon workers or for people at USPS or people in car manufacturing. And so their prototyped suits, that specifically are to support the back and the shoulders when you're lifting above your shoulders, they can sell way more to those industries than they can to the military, because the military ended up scrapping the Talos project in 2019. And they realized, actually these exoskeleton suits, they don't work the way we want them to, because they realized, this is a quote, an exoskeleton requires power on par with a small motorcycle. If you wanted to do it the kind of the way in 1985 here is being described, like a powered suit, you need some kind of battery that's super heavy, right? Or an engine that's super loud. You don't want that. Also, if it's an engine, it's probably got explosive materials on it. So now your soldiers are walking around with a bomb strapped to them, essentially.
Yikes.
It's the battery weight problem. You have to find the cost benefit of the tipping point, right? The inflection point. At what point does the efficacy of an exoskeleton outweigh, I'm choosing the word perfectly there, outweigh the expensive weight of the battery, right? Because it would almost certainly have to be a battery, and solar power is not to the point where it could be dependable in that regard. So even if you are a U.S. soldier in a war zone now, as Reuters notes in a fantastic article in 2018, you're deployed in a war zone, you're bogged down by heavy gear that, again, you can't get rid of. Body armor, night vision goggles.
Already.
Right? Yeah. This could weigh anywhere from 90 to 140 pounds, which is well over the recommended limit of 50 pounds. And a battery is going to be heavy at this point. That's so much to carry on a normal hike, right? And
but theoretically, if you are wearing that huge battery and you are carrying 150 pounds around with you, theoretically, what that exoskeleton suit would do is take all of that weight off of you, basically, and it would be lifting it for you. But the best that they were able to come up with all the way up until 2019 was they reduce the effects of that weight on your body.
Right, to mitigate, not to completely solve. And that's going to be an important concept later on, too. I mean, this leads logically to the next step, the possible partial automation of an exoskeleton. What if your exoskeleton has a limited degree of autonomy? What if we solve for the weight issue and you are now wearing a battle suit that automatically removes you from harm's way if you're wounded or immobilized? Now it turns into just a running version of a car. How far does that go? You know what I mean?
Which is sort of what those super soldiers in the Fallout universe are all about. Basically, people have died inside the suits, and the automaton elements of the suits just kind of keep on going.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then for the what is that? It's the U.S. Army's. There's another organization that was looking at this stuff. Combat Capabilities Development Command, or DevCom is the name of it. They're looking at all that stuff, trying to figure out all those things. And guess what they found, guys?
What did they find, Matt?
Why would we do all of this to outfit the soldiers when we could just have a machine in the first place?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the question that comes to mind, yes.
Yeah. That's the immediate question. Would this automation lead to a world where you don't actually need a person in the suit? And this gets us to another aspect of it. We talked about HUD, or a HUD, a heads-up display, AI partnership, implants. So much of recent warfare research and breakthroughs center on, not bayonets proverbially, but communication, surveillance, intelligence. If you were a soldier in, say, the 1800s or in the Civil War, you would be astonished with the sophistication of wireless communication, the info that can be transmitted to an individual in real time, automated targeting assistance, which is only going to become increasingly sophisticated. I mean, there's the realm of biohazard protection. You've got Fallout in my head now, Noel. Mm-hmm. Imagine a helmet that's a gas mask, a command center, a homing beacon, a GPS, a multi-spectrum light, laser, and thermal sensor.
Like a Pip-Boy.
Like a Pip-Boy in your head, all at once. And I know I sound like I'm doing a made-for-TV commercial, but wait, there's more. As Billy Mays was wont to say, what if this also gives you control of a drone swarm?
Yeah, I mean, it's potential. So the hyper-enabled operator, which is a thing that is happening right now, that is a program that SOCOM is operating for SOF operators, guys, Special Operations Forces. They want to have a soldier that has all the things we're describing here, but they want to do it with technology. And they don't want to do it with like a suit that you're wearing. They just want like little sensors and stuff that you wear, like bracelets and stuff across your chest that give you all of those things you're talking about, Ben.
Yeah, but still part of a suit. Is still part of the uniform, the battle dress.
Yeah, for sure. It's a battle dress, but it's not this kind of exoskeleton like the way we've been talking about it before, right? That helps with movement and all those things. It's simply to make the soldier be able to sense everything. So, like, if somebody in let's say a squad, what do you call this, guys? A group of soldiers operating together?
I think that's right. I think squad's appropriate.
I don't know.
Yeah,
somebody
for sure.
on your team gets shot, right? Who's operating with you? you would get a heads up display that the team member X got shot, and here is where they are on the map, like where you are. And you'd have a look down. They call a look down display, where you actually look down and you can see it, or you can look up and you can see it on your display. Like, that kind of stuff is insane. And to be able to sense actual enemy combatants on the field as you look out with these kinds of things, or again, Fallout is the best way to imagine it if you've been inside one of those suits, because it looks to me like that.
What are the suits called in the game? Power armor. That's power armor. Yeah, for sure.
So then imagine if you have all that stuff that is in development right now in a real project, and as Ben says, you've also got drones. You've also got the little robot dogs that are carrying equipment behind you. You've also, you've got all this stuff, and you can control it all from your suit. That would be astounding.
Well, and to the point about some of this stuff sort of trickling out into the public, you certainly see in safety systems of modern cars sort of like a lower tech version of some of this stuff with like haptics, like your steering wheel will vibrate if someone's about to pass you on the left, et cetera, right?
Yeah, 100%. Now imagine if your Cybertruck or your Tesla Model 3 also had a swarm of drones. This is where we see that hyper real-time information loop. Right now, we could probably, I would argue we should, record an entire episode about the ongoing drone arms race. A soldier of the future ideally never really travels alone. Instead, this future soldier, theoretically, would be orbited by a small crowd of networked drones, all reporting in real time and all linked to the other soldiers' swarm of drones, maybe even capable of launching remote attacks. It's kind of like how in Marvel Comics, Falcon has his drone on his back. What's it called? Red Wing? He launches Red Wing when he's flying around. So a future super soldier could integrate drones in an unprecedented fashion, making each fighter an actual, quote, one-man army. Get this, though. What if all that did happen, despite the naysayers, and the soldiers active there were also invisible? I feel like I have to say it in a silly way because it's so weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's way better than just commanding a murder of crows like you're able to, Ben.
It's too kind. That's too kind and too weird.
Let's take a quick ad break and we'll come back and talk all about it.
And we've returned. Guys, before we jump in, just one last thing on this suit, because I think the invisibility thing ties into it. Have you seen images of the Ratnik 3 combat suit?
Yes.
Search that up really quick.
Yep.
Oh, it looks a lot like power armor. Russian military combat suit that incorporates a powered exoskeleton designed to enhance strength, speed, and endurance. Oh, it's got some sort of like nano material, hexagonal armor plating and webbing, actuators, little mini motors between the pieces of armor, right?
Yeah, so this is Russia's counter to the Talos program in the U.S., and these images are mostly from 2018 when there was a huge publicity push for this. Again, probably as a response to the Talos program, which ended in 2019. It's just interesting to look at these, specifically this version, because of the way the hexagonal armor plating looks. I think it's designed to look futuristic rather than actually be operational and to function in the way we want it to, or like as a military mind. This may not function the way we want it to, but for these pictures, for this announcement, it looks like it does. It sure as heck does.
It's not that far off from like Tesla and their robots that look away, but in actuality are controlled remotely, in their current state. It's more about optics than it is about actual function. There's an article I think you're probably referring to, Matt, on Forbes, The Hype and Reality of Russian Exoskeleton Technology for the Russia-Ukraine War by Vikram Mittal, again, from Forbes.
Yeah, there's a Defense One article I was looking at that's just really interesting. It talks about the arms race that the U.S. and Russia are in, or were in, back in 2018 there. And it's one of those things. So if you just imagine, a lot of the stuff we're encountering is PR, and it is meant to send a message to everybody, hey, we've got this brand new amazing tech, but what if there really is stuff that both DARPA and every other research agency for every other country is developing that has potentially the ability to cloak in some way.
And we're talking cloak like visually, not just from radar and certain sensors, right? We're talking like Predator-style cloaking.
Yes, that's a great analogy, Noel. This sounds positively sci-fi or a Harry Potter fantasy land, but when we think about it, true invisibility, or the attempt to achieve that, is only the next logical progression of camouflage, itself already an ancient art. Please check out our ridiculous history episodes on those
Dazzle
zebra
camo.
stripes. Yeah.
Literally just a zebra. It's pulled from nature. It's these particular patterns that from a distance create an optical illusion wherein like warships kind of blend into the horizon. It's not high tech at all. It's literally paint.
Yeah. And now research into this concept of invisibility has made bonkers strides in recent years in public and private initiatives. Everything we see in the public sphere with invisibility is right now in what we could more or less call the proof of concept stage, meaning you can see the principle or not see the principle at play. You could go to places like Canada's hyper stealth biotechnology. In 2019, they filed a patent for what they call quantum stealth materials. It's bending light around a target to make it seemingly disappear. And yes, to the Predator question, this solves the problem Arnold Schwarzenegger has when he faces the Predator. Remember, he covers himself in mud to mask his thermal sig.
That's right, to cloak his the heat signature. Yeah. Exactly.
And then the Predator is confused for a moment and says, "Whatever, my guy," and switches his sensors. I can't remember if it's the same film. He switches his sensors to ultraviolet or some other spectrum of light. This quantum stealth stuff and other related proof of concept ideas, they can also bend ultraviolet, infrared, shortwave infrared. And if it works, now again, to that earlier point made about propaganda and press releases, if it works, these companies argue they have created what they call a broadband invisibility cloak. I don't know if we have time to think about this, but it feels important for all of us listening at home to consider what happens. Like, we give the National Invention Secrecy Act a hard time, rightly so, because it is a violation of inventor rights. But if you're the people in charge, would you want a world where anybody can buy a true invisibility cloak? How would you regulate that?
Definitely one of the top wished for superpowers. You can do a lot with that one.
Invisicrime, you know?
It'd have to be military grade kind of thing, right? It would have to be like with certain firearms in the U.S. that you just can't buy them if they have certain specs, or you can't own them unless you meet certain requirements, kind of thing.
Regulated heavily, right? Until someone figures out how to do their own homemade versions. You know, and there's a new era of terrorism. It's weird, and it's a pickle that I think we'll return to again and again. But you could make the argument for us to really understand that we would need to do nootropics and cognitive enhancing substances, just like the Mentats in the Dune series. Drugs are still so big. We're not talking about snarfing and edible and chilling. I can't remember if we talked about this, but you guys probably heard Vietnam is often called the first pharmacological war, or the Vietnam War, not the country.
Yeah. That's what, because of certain substances that the U.S. military was consuming. But were they actually given these by the government, or was this just okay?
Yeah, they were given some, and then of course people were, hitting their Thai stick, and other more dangerous substances were being consumed. But
I wouldn't say that gives you much of an edge. I'm curious.
It makes you great at appreciating music,
sure,
and snacks.
There was so much testing in that era of military personnel that had no idea what they were doing. They would just sign. You signed up and you signed away your rights to not be tested on. So, kind of gross.
Yeah, not great.
Shadows of World War II, painkillers, methamphetamine. Like, in almost every historical case of state-sanctioned drug use for soldiers, the individuals experimented on or dosed with this stuff, they encounter debilitating consequences to their physical and mental health down the line.
Not to mention addiction, potentially.
Yes, that's one of the dangerous ones. Yeah, the vast majority of these drug-based initiatives, they weren't seeking to cure things. They were temporary Band-Aid solutions. Let's give someone enough speed to keep them running, to keep them awake. Let's give them enough painkillers to fight through an injury. And that's like giving insulin to a diabetic. It mitigates a symptom. It does not cure the underlying condition.
Well, there's also diminishing returns, especially with the speed stuff where, you do need the sleep. It is a fact. So if you're staying up for days or whatever, on amphetamines, you are eventually going to lose your ability to make rational decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why you take the sleeping pills, so you can get 4 down. And then
that's how Elvis did it. Yeah. That's how Elvis did it.
That's we heard from several people who've written into us when we did the war on drugs.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And this, I think, gives us another look into the very dangerous side effects. Your body then becomes pushed past its natural limits. An injury you encounter may indeed be worsened because you kept going. And then on the horizon, the ever-present threat of addiction, which haunts people even today. And we know sanctioned drug use will inevitably continue for now in some form. There will be increasingly sophisticated, more efficient, or more efficacious, less dangerous drugs, but they'll still be temporary. It's going to be like taking a potion in a video game, right? That improves your speed or your strength for, whatever the window of time is.
Yeah, you get a temporary buff, I think.
A temporary buff. That's it. You nailed it, Noel. And that means that the real golden goose here, the holy grail, is not Band-Aid solutions. It's not changing what that warfighter ingests. It's changing the body of the soldier themselves. Genetic manipulation. Proponents argue this can solve problems beyond the scope of drugs and technology. And before we continue, I got to say, this creeps me out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just thinking about instead of making tech to improve things like a soldier's hearing. So like one of the things in the Talos project, which I thought you guys would find really funny, is that they wanted to give soldiers 3D audio.
Yeah.
Like basically enhanced binaural audio.
Sure.
But ultimately that's just human ears. So it's like having hearing aids of some sort, But imagine if you could just give somebody at their genetic level super hearing or super sight.
Yeah. Or like the ability to breathe underwater. Let's take it a step further. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or the ability to pee through your skin, which sharks and skates do. Just, hear me out. We're going to do an ad break. We've returned. Genetic improvements. All right. As you can tell, this is one of the most exciting and perhaps disturbing possibilities. And it is way less sci-fi, way less comic book than it might sound at first. Guys, I was thinking about our series on real life superpowers, which I look back on with such fondness because we went into it skeptical, yet we found multiple instances of proven genetic abnormalities, though I don't love that word, that granted some individuals abilities beyond that of mortal kin. These were like rare lottery wins of evolution. I remember seeing the study about this anonymous 3 or 4-year-old who was absolutely jacked, and they had to, hide the kid's identity because a 3 or 4-year-old can't consent to being, displayed as kind of a freak show.
Little buff boys.
Little buff boys. Yeah. Very much so, but without the bodysuit. This kid was just ready for it.
It's a goose suit. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
What's the name of the kid? They're like, not you. No, you. Come on. You know it can't be you.
You know it can't be you, right? It can't be you.
Sorry. It also makes me think of what's that guy Wim Hof we talked about?
Yes.
Who can regulate his body temperature. A lot of this stuff can be achieved without genetic mutation, just by like crazy amounts of discipline and mental manipulation of oneself and meditative kind of properties. Again, I think people are skeptical about that, but if I'm not mistaken, that guy kind of did do the thing, with his mind.
He did, yes. He is genetically not he is not manifesting or exhibiting any sort of rare recessive trait. It is training, and as you said, meditation, self-regulation, sort of the way that black cab drivers in the UK have managed to increase their spatial memory and indeed the physical size.
It can be measured, like with brain scans, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why the knowledge is a crazy hard test. If you happen to have taken the knowledge, let us know. We'd love to pick your brain. We also know, okay, for a long time, these were considered sort of genetic lottery winners, these one-offs, right? And these people have these limited, often narrow-scoped, extraordinary abilities, but then the rise of CRISPR came. And as it, like before it went to the public sphere, honestly, militaries already began saying, well, you know, what if we found some of this league of extraordinary people, and what if we could transmit or translate some of those abilities to other people? Question one, would these people, one, would it work? Two, would these people have to be biologically related, right? Would be a matter of turning a recessive gene into, like, expressing it. The goal was to create this in non-biologically related organisms. In this case, human beings. One of the favorites, all right, we know this, lowering sleep requirements. Makes sense, you know? You're a pilot, you're flying a spy plane for a long time, you're behind enemy territory, you know, you're running and gunning. Wouldn't it be awesome if you only had to sleep 3 hours?
I just saw a thing. I think it was a study, or like basically there are genetic mutations that allow certain individuals to function highly with very, very, very limited sleep.
I'm thinking specifically of some work published by the National Institutes of Health. Multiple studies have confirmed that there is a gene that causes people to naturally sleep less than about 6 hours per 24-hour cycle, importantly, with no negative side effects. Nothing, you know, the world record for sleep, days without sleep or time without sleep is something no one should attempt. It will give you hallucinations. It will have damaging health effects. But these folks, some of them with this gene, they need even less sleep per 24-hour cycle.
And this was a new study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Genetic variant is one of a handful that have been identified in people who don't need a lot of sleep. They're able to mutation linked to thriving with little rest.
ADRB1 gene.
Correct.
Yeah. And this is, there's a lot of research on this because it sounds too crazy to be true, but it is solid. So what if we could take CRISPR, precise gene editing techniques, and say, oh, let's find someone who naturally doesn't sleep that well, or doesn't need to sleep that much at all. And then let's find someone who also has increased bone density, right? And then let's find one of those jacked toddlers or someone who has increased muscle mass, and we'll pick and choose, you know, just like a buffet or just like picking the ingredients of your burrito at Chipotle, and then we'll put them into, you know, the flour tortilla skin of another person.
Sounds delicious.
I mean, it means for better or worse, we're not that far away from a real life Captain America, but this gets us to the weirdest one. And Matt, I know you have read up on this as well. It's the tardigrade question. As far back as 2020, U.S. intelligence officials said, look, and they went public. There's propaganda, there's signaling here. They went public and they said, look, everyone, fellow folks in the United States, the world entire, the nation of China is conducting human testing on members of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. You can read the full op-ed in Wall Street Journal. It's by John Ratcliffe, who is the director of national intelligence at the time. He didn't disclose specifics, so maybe it was saber rattling until about 2022, when the PLA Academy of Military Sciences announced that they had successfully inserted a gene from tardigrades into human embryonic stem cells. They did it. They pulled a chimera, and it worked.
That's yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say it. Okay. Sure you did. Sure you did.
So you don't think it happened?
I think they did it maybe, and it didn't go well. But they still put it out because it sounds scary to anybody who would oppose them.
Yeah, and the ethical argument, which we'll get to, is they said, look, we synthetically created these stem cells. Therefore, it's not a problem. Everybody, all other scientists.
Yeah.
But maybe we talk about why the tardigrade is such a big deal. What were they trying to do?
Well, tardigrades can exist in places where most biological life cannot. But one of the reasons they can is because they're so dang teeny and tiny, which, you know, they can exist under pressures like in outer space, like the zero pressure kind of thing where humans, you know, and other biological things just kind of go pop. If you're out there in space, they can also exist way down at the bottom of the ocean where there's tremendous pressures. If a human could somehow transfer those properties into their skin and tissues and organs and all that stuff, then yeah, I mean, that would be crazy. You could have humans flying around in space. You just need oxygen then.
Also known as the water bear, or get this, the moss piglet. That was a new one for me.
It's the cute little fella. That's what I like to call him. Boy, oh boy. And they're so powerful. They're like godlike. I mean, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that are they like the closest thing to alien species with their abilities that we kind of have a little bit of a line on? It's wild. I mean, I know that they are organically generated here on Earth, but man, oh man, the way they can live in those dormant states out in space and stuff, it's fascinating. Smaller
than a 1 millimeter, right? So small that the English measurement system had to go metric to explain them.
That takes a lot.
Yeah, it takes so much.
That's a tall order.
So for a tiny guy, he is mighty. There have been years of testing on this, reproducible results. You can play along at home with the right equipment. We're talking surviving negative 200 degrees Celsius, throw them in boiling water, and they're fine. It's just a jacuzzi to them, the vacuum of space. So the goal of the scientist explicitly stated was to evaluate whether you could take a specific gene from a tardigrade and use it to create soldiers resistant to radiation. In other words, folks who could survive nuclear fallout. Important note, not a direct nuclear blast. They could still get mushroom cloud vaporized. Totally. But if they came in afterwards, they would not suffer, or they would have mitigated consequences for acute radiation poisoning and exposure.
And this is actually gene therapy, right? This isn't gene manipulation. This is not just like a vaccine or some kind of drug that people could be. It's not Band-Aid, to your point, Ben. This is like change. But have we talked about the ethical ramifications of this kind of stuff? I know we sort of hinted at it as we've been going along, but it seems like it's real slippery once you get into changing people's entire kind of genetic makeup. And to the point earlier, too, about trotting out this technology before fully understanding the big picture.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think that's where we start to end, because this transplanted gene, per these studies, if these studies can be believed, the transplanted gene, when it exists naturally in the tardigrade, it allows that life form, that moss piglet, to create shielding proteins that harden it against dangerous emissions like radiation. The team claims that this was successful, that after transplanting this gene, the human embryonic cells showed a vast improvement toward radiation exposure, and they found a bonus power. They found a combo meal at this Chipotle. Not only did the new cells behave normally, so no self-destruction, no cancer, etc., but they also demonstrated accelerated cell growth. So if you put these water bear man cells or whatever in new blood cells, you could achieve something amazing, a clean transfer of that ability to a human subject, so long as you don't worry about the ethics, because just like military drugs, this is a minefield, dude.
Yeah, but when I hear the expression accelerated cell growth, doesn't that scream kind of cancer in a way as well?
Yeah.
Like, I just mean in terms of like, how accelerated and what happens over a long enough timeline? We is it going to cause really, really negative, impacts on the human, on human cell growth, et cetera?
That would be freaking crazy if you could grow and train a human in a third of the time that generally it takes to build a soldier, right? Mm-hmm. To have a from birth to soldier timeline or something like that. And especially if you could clone them, right? And
that's
you do
Star Wars right there, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
sure. Yeah, truly.
But again, all of that stuff ends up getting kind of, it's super useful, but when there are machines that do the same thing, they're really expensive, right? And, special operations forces have this saying, like, the human is more important than the hardware at all times.
Sure.
But ultimately, if you take the human out of the situation, then almost everything we've talked about today is possible because you just need integrated sensor systems. And then you can do all of these things, including the cloaking, including, existing in and operating in other spaces to be resistant to radiation, all of that stuff. It's freaky to me to think that it feels like the militaries across the world wanted this stuff because that was the most viable way to have an edge when you're talking about a singular soldier on a battlefield. But now, with the way tech has moved, it just becomes who's got the best mech, which feels even more sci-fi to me.
Nah, it really is the stuff of... It is, That's why sci-fi is so important. They tend to nail stuff way, way, way beforehand. And I'm sorry, just really quickly, guys. I think I thought maybe I was tripping, but cancer is about accelerating cell growth. It's just kind of accelerated beyond control. So to me, this is like, okay, that sounds cool. If what you're describing, Matt, this whole like accelerated growth, period. But it also seems like unchecked, maybe there are some future ramifications that we don't know about yet.
This is why I argue it's mission critical to walk through everything else aside. It's mission critical to walk through the ethical concerns about this. That's what I meant when I said ethical minefield. First, your point, Noel, society and humans don't know what those consequences will be. It's primarily because, when you flip a gene, right, you're not flipping one light switch. You're flipping a light switch that affects a bunch of other light switches in unpredictable ways. So improving bone density may lead to other less desirable mutations. We don't know if it just turns everybody's eyes green and their hair blue, right? We don't know what will happen. We don't know if it leads to chronic medical conditions or, of course, to cancer, which could take time to spot. Second, and this is something people need to think about more often, we don't know whether these modifications result in heritable traits. If a gene like this, or, tardigrade gene, for example, if it could be inherited, then the children born with those genes have no right to consent to this purposeful human experimentation. Their soldier parents signed up for it. They did not. We see similar arguments alleging that medical conditions have already been inherited due to exposure to toxic substances. You know what I mean? So there's a heavy question there.
I guess with all of this and the sci-fi angle of it, my mind immediately pictures like server farm sized facilities with just like fetuses, in tanks, like breeding, humans for soldiering purposes. That's sort of the most dystopian version of this, right?
Mm-hmm. And we don't have any understanding of how this tactic or this methodology would affect a soldier's reintegration into peacetime society. Can superhumans have the same rights as non-modified people? What happens when some inevitable social media lunatic activist starts saying, hey, these are not people at all? One of the brutal sort of USSR Soviet answers to this would be to also program in a limited time window of life for these people.
Totally.
Which is, evil, but I don't know. There's so much more to this story, guys. Do we have any concluding statements here? I feel like we're going to hear a lot about this one, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, same. No, I think this is a fascinating topic and certainly ongoing.
Well, folks, we have decided to consider this the beginning of a conversation that can go in many directions. We're sort of at the point of Schrodinger's soldier with this research. And we have a lot of veterans in the audience. We are grateful for your time. As so many of us know, a lot of new technology gets rolled out before it's perfected. sometimes with disastrous consequence. We would love to hear your experiences with any of the concepts we explored today, and we would especially love to hear your thoughts, your objective, honest thoughts on which of these things may actually become reality and how they may roll out. So that's it for us tonight. We're off to Noctivigate. The trickiest thing here is the public cannot tell how far the real research has gone, to the earlier point about propaganda, to the point about national security, to the point of classic military paranoia. Whether it's due to one or more of these factors, the truth is that a lot of super soldier research is still the stuff they don't want you to know. So tell us your thoughts. You can give us a good old-fashioned email. You can call us on a telephonic device, or you can hit us up on the lines in the social meds thou might sip.
Indeed. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On YouTube, where we have video content galore for you to enjoy. And on X, FKA Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
I missed you on this one, man, because when you were out, I would just try to sum it up real quick. But you're nailing it. I think you're the best of us at it.
I summon demons with those words.
Oh, yes. Shout out to Colonel Alex McCalman, I believe is how you would say it. He was the chief engineer of the Talos Project, and you can watch a YouTube presentation that he put out on June 16th, 2019, titled Talos Project Transition to the Hyper-Enabled Operator, SOFIC 2019. It is fascinating. If you want to call us about anything we talked about today, our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. It's a 3-minute voicemail. You can say whatever you want. We do appreciate it if you give yourself a cool nickname and let us know within the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you want to send us an email, we are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Give us your thoughts, however brief, however long. Identify yourself as you wish. Given the content of this episode, please let us know if you need to remain anonymous, and we will do our best to make it so. We also want to recommend in the ethics conversation we had at the end here, the following conference report. Look it up, The Ethical and Legal Significance of Super Soldiers. This was presented by the Center for Ethics and Rule of Law, Annenberg Public Policy Center, University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Shout out to Major Kyle Brown. This is an excellent summation of the serious questions at play. Let us know your thoughts. And hey, man, if you think, screw it, no holds barred, let's just roll the dice and see what happens to civilization, tell us that too. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.